morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Sir Meerkat, and welcome back to the Moto Meerkat channel. Now, with 2020 being as mental as it is right now, there have been many people sort of chatting and thinking about what we could change in Formula 1 to make it a bit more interesting. And one of these ideas to sort of reinvent the sport, hopefully, would be to implement reverse grid sprint races. Now, obviously, I can see that there's positives and negatives to that idea, but I think we can all agree we'd love to see more F1 action and obviously closer F1 action. But what if I told you in the 80s and 90s you could see current, well, obviously not current, they'd have to have a time traveling machine for that, but current at the time, Formula 1 cars racing around a little arena. This is the story of the Formula 1 indoor trophy. Sadly, right off the bat, Formula 1 is already lying to us. Even the name of the event is a little bit untrue. The F1 Indoor Trophy was not in fact inside. Having V12 and V10 engine cars screaming around an enclosed space was too much even for the health and safety of the 80s and 90s. But a car park in Bologna was deemed perfectly safe, and this is where 8 indoor trophies would be held. To be fair, the organisers didn't just rock up to like an Asda car park and go, yeah, that looks good. The car park was actually connected to the arena which hosted the Bologna Motor Show, which was a highly prestigious motorsport event at the time, but it seems to have died away a bit. I was looking at the Wikipedia. It states that in 2018 that the show did not take place due to financial and logistical reasons, and in 2019 the show was defunct and now converted to a show about virtual reality, driving simulators and video games. Now, I'm not hugely into sort of motor shows and anything like that, but if anyone has more information on that and why it stopped so recently as well, let me know in the comments down below. Another frustrating fact about the F1 Indoor Trophy was the fact that you would never actually see wheel-to-wheel action on track. As surprisingly enough, going side by side in a car park probably isn't going to end well. So the racing would instead run as sort of more similarly to the Race of Champions, which we still do have today, but at the time of the F1 Indoor Trophy, Race of Champions was strictly a rally event only. And this format that they used had 2 competitors battling it out head to head on track, but they would each start at different points on the track. And that format, which they did use, saw 2 opponents battling out head to head on the same track at the same time, but not actually racing. Each competitor would start at a different point on the track, and the first to complete 4 laps would be crowned the winner. So it's basically like a time trial, but with a little bit more drama. And the track layout in the Bologna car park looked as such. Starting on the upper straight, they would dive through a sharp right-left, down to another right-hander, darting into another right before a fast kink, through to a swooping right-hander, then a long left-hander before a hairpin, a second hairpin, 2 sharp right-handers before ending back on the initial start-finish straight. For the first event in 1988, 5 teams would in fact show their faces, although it would have been awesome to see the Marlboro McLarens of the time, Ayrton Senna and Alan Prost battling out on track. We didn't quite see that. The teams that would in fact show up were Eurobrun, BMS Dallara, Ossola, Minardi and First. Now, First, who I hilariously read out last in that list, they were actually an F3000 team who were planning on entering F1 in 1989, but of course, that never happened. They never could quite get the money together, and they knew their car was going to be uncompetitive as hell anyway, so they just binned it off. But for the initial F1 Indoor Trophy, each team would have 1 driver, except Minardi, who decided to bring 2 along, Pierluigi Martini and Luis Perez Sala. Now, there's going to be a lot of foreign names from now forward, so I do apologise if I mispronounce any of them. So the lots for the initial quarter-final were drawn completely randomly. Alex Caffey in the BMS Dallara would knock out Nicola Lorini in the Osella, who is in fact a man. Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi would beat out Gabriele Tarquini in the first, and Luis Perez Sala in the Minardi would win against Fabrizio Barbazza in the Eurobrun. Luis Perez Sala would also knock out Nicola Lorini to move on to the final. Now, I'm assuming that Nicola was able to make it through somehow because of the odd numbers. However, his teammate Pierluigi would not be so successful, allowing for Alex Caffey to actually challenge the Minardis, beating out Pierluigi, but actually losing to Perez Sala in the final, giving the win to Minardi, who were the favourites, to be fair. 1989 saw Perez Sala win again in the Minardi, this time beating out Pierre-Henri Raffanel in the Coloni, Andrea De Cesaris in the BMS Dallara, and his own teammate Pierluigi Martini in the final. Presumably due to his experience, De Cesaris was actually given a space in the semi-final without actually having to win any races in the quarter-final, which meant his first race came up against Perez Sala, who quickly beat him. How embarrassing. Sala had actually decided to put 2 cars forward this time around, with Andrea Chisser being knocked out in the quarter-final and Enrico Battaglia being knocked out in the semi-final. For 1990, only 5 cars entered the trophy, with Gianni Morbidelli in the Minardi pipping Olivier Grouillard to the top step, beating out famous faces such as JJ Leto. But the streak of Minardi wins would eventually be broken in 1991. Defending champion Morbidelli would actually be knocked out in the first round. Shock horror. With returning Gabriele Tarquini, this time in the Fond Metal car, beating out Johnny Herbert in the Lotus. Did you guys actually know that Johnny Herbert grew up right near Tomo F1? He doesn't mention it very much, so I thought I'd give you that little fact for free. And 1992 actually saw the first properly wet event. Obviously, not being indoors means that rain can affect the runnings. And it certainly did, as the cars slid along the well-laid Italian tarmac. Johnny Herbert would this time take the win that he missed out on the previous year, still in the Lotus car. And this time he would pip JJ Leto in the final, clearly JJ not having too much luck. The format of the entire event would change for 1993. The 5 entrants would complete in some preliminary events, competing in preliminary events. That's where we're gonna go with that one. With the top 4 moving on to the knockout stages. And these knockouts would also be very different, with each matchup being a best of 3 rather than just a 1 go 4-lap dash and you're done. F1's sweetheart Rubens Barrichello would actually end up taking the top step in his Jordan, winning the preliminary rounds and knocking out the other Jordan of Vittorio Zoboli and the Minardi of Pierluigi Martini to win the trophy. The show would not actually take place in 1994, so neither did the indoor trophy, but it would return in 1995 with only 2 teams taking part this time around, Minardi and Forti. And it seems it's become an all-Italian affair for this year, with all 6 drivers, obviously 3 from each team, being Italian. An eventual Ferrari driver, Luca Badoa, actually took the win for Minardi this time around. And 1996 would prove to be the final year of the indoor trophy, but to be honest, I'm glad to see that the show went out with a bang. For the final year, the competition had 3 teams competing. The usual Minardis of Giovanni Lavaggi and Tarso Marquez, and 2 actual race-winning teams. The Ligiers, piloted by Shindy Nakano and Olivier Panis, and the Benettons, driven by Jarno Trulli and Giancarlo Fisichella. This injection of genuine talent proved to do quite well for the trophy, as this would be the most exciting year to date. Olivier Panis got it all wrong in the preliminary rounds, having a large accident that put him out of the competition altogether. The other Ligier car of Shinji Nakano managed to make it through to the knockout stages of the trophy, but damaged his car in the process. As the spare car had been totaled by Panis, he would not actually be able to compete further in the competition. Ligier would have to pull out, handing Tasso Marquez the space on a plate, which he immediately screwed up, losing to Giancarlo Fisichella, who would end up winning the competition overall for that year. And as I said, for 1997, the trophy was scrapped. Quite as to why, I'm not sure. Maybe because the show was a little bit of a gimmick. It didn't really add anything to the Formula 1 spectacle. It was sort of more like, oh look, there's Formula 1 cars racing on a car park there. That's a bit weird. And yes, I'm sure it would be great to see the cars today whizzing round that Italian car park, but I don't think it's ever going to happen. I mean, probably because just turning up for the event costs a hell of a lot, especially for Ligier, who had a few crashes there. And they would have to make sure that their cars are properly race ready, which again costs a lot of money. And without the backing for the trophy from the top teams, it was always going to crumble, and it was sort of just more of a piss about with the lads. But as I mentioned earlier, the Race of Champions has sort of taken on the legacy of the F1 Indoor Trophy, with many of our favourite drivers batting it out every year on temporary circuits, in stadiums of such, going all across the world. It's a fantastic spectacle. But realistically, we're never going to see Formula 1 cars in such an enclosed space. So what do you think of the F1 Indoor Trophy? Do you think that we should bring something similar back today, or do you reckon it's a relic best left in the motorsport past? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. But if you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like on it down below. I do really appreciate it. And if you subscribe to the Moto Meerkat channel as well, that would mean so much. I make motorsport content every week. But thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see all of you Meerkats later. Goodbye, guys.